Marmite vis the dialectical duel, int. DPCS office, late night. The office is humming with fluorescent misery. Rain slaps the windows. The kettle has given up. A printer in the corner makes a noise like it's dying of shame. On the desk, a phone screen full of long Facebook comments written by a man who appears to think punctuation is for the weak, and clarity is bourgeois decadence. Marmite stares at it. Long blink. Then another. He turns slowly to camera. Marmite. Right, I have just read the phrase, I am more than willing to a dialectical duel with anyone, and I would like the state to buy me a new nervous system. What the fuck is a dialectical duel? Is that before or after the epistemological bare knuckle in the car park behind Iceland? Do we all turn up with a copy of Hegel tucked in our waistband and start headbutting each other with syllogisms? Because let me be absolutely clear from the jump. The issue here is not that this man is too intellectual for the room. The issue is that he keeps mistaking ornate fucking waffle for argumentative force. That's not the same thing. It has never been the same thing. And no amount of Latin confetti is going to make it the same thing now. He keeps telling us he follows empiricism, cogent reasoning, due diligence, background checks, books, journals, periodicals. Lovely. So where are they then? Where is the clean claim? Where is the evidence tied to the claim? Where is the distinction between what's being described, what's being implied, and what's being endorsed? Because what I'm seeing is not a disciplined argument. It's a man filling the room with smoke and then insisting the smoke is architecture. Gillian enters carrying a mug that says, "World's most tired bitch." Gillian, oh God, is it another one of those? Marmite, it's one of those, aye. You know the type. A bloke writes 6 screens of overcooked prose, names every serious concept he's ever shagged past in a library, and then acts affronted when somebody asks him what the fuck he actually means. Gillian, the if I sound enough like a haunted encyclopedia, nobody can accuse me of talking shite genre. Marmite, that's the one. This bastard's entire style is assertion by atmosphere, not argument by evidence, not reasoning by structure. Atmosphere. He names war, history, religion, the human condition, casus belli, borders, states, nuclear weapons, logistics, military capability, and expects us to confuse the mere mention of serious topics with the successful handling of them. That's not rigor. That's fucking set dressing. It's like wheeling a load of medical equipment on stage and expecting applause because the props look expensive. Milo appears from under a pile of paperwork he seems to have been emotionally buried beneath for some time. Milo, what's the central dodge? Marmite, oh, it's a classic. He says, I'm not justifying war, I'm merely being realistic. He says, I'm not bloodthirsty, I'm merely interested in military history. He says, I'm not issuing a manifesto, I'm just diagnosing the human condition. Right. Then say it plainly, you Baroque cunt. Because if you genuinely mean, I am describing the risks, not endorsing the outcome, then write that. If you genuinely mean, my interest in military systems is historical and analytical, not moral admiration for destruction, then write that. If you genuinely mean I'm commenting on the conditions that create conflict, not celebrating force, then write that. But no, instead we get this grand fog bank of inflated nouns and theatrical seriousness, and then he acts like everyone else is crude for noticing the implications. That is not the audience failing a comprehension test. That is the writer refusing to do the basic adult labor of clarity. Marmite hops onto the desk, knocking over 3 paperclips and 1 piece of institutional hope. Marmite. And the bloodlust bit. Right, let's do that properly. There is nothing inherently wrong with being interested in military history. Nothing. Doctrine, logistics, mechanics, strategy, materiel, force projection, whatever. Loads of people study that stuff. Fine. But context matters, doesn't it? If you spend a huge amount of time wrapping yourself in the prestige of military seriousness, talking about ordnance, fleets, nuclear systems, strategic reality, and the harsh truths of human nature, while also talking about ordinary people like their intellectually incontinent debris clogging up civilization, then don't clutch your pearls when somebody says, "Mate, this has a weirdly aroused relationship to force." Because that's the tone you created, not them, you. And tone matters because tone tells us whether we're in the presence of somebody trying to understand power or somebody trying to borrow power's aura to make themselves sound larger. And I'm sorry, but this whole thing reeks of a man wearing seriousness like rented armour. Gillian. He also keeps self-certifying, doesn't he? Marmite. Aye, and that's always a red flag the size of Belgium. I am diligent in my utterances. I follow cogent reasoning. I do due diligence first and foremost. Right. And yet the writing itself is a fucking mess. That's the bit I love. The man keeps handing himself medals for precision while writing sentences that wander off halfway through and come back wearing a different hat. He praises discipline in prose that behaves like it's had 3 pints and a head injury. And that matters, because real rigour doesn't need constant self-advertising. A person doing careful reasoning usually just does it. They don't keep standing in the middle of the sentence, "Behold, I am now doing empiricism." That's like a chef yelling culinary excellence while dropping chips on the floor. Hash Milo. So what's the actual structural flaw? Marmite, good question. The structural flaw is that he keeps substituting density for specificity. Those are different. A thing can be dense because it is rich, well-supported and intricate, or it can be dense because it's bloated, underdefined and terminally in love with its own fucking echo. This is the second one. He keeps stacking up heavy-sounding abstractions: history, agency, conditions, support, rectitude, borders, inevitability, modernity, realism, without ever slowing down long enough to define the claim in terms precise enough to be tested. And if your claim cannot be stated simply enough to be challenged, then half the time it's not a robust claim at all. It's a posture. That's the scam. The whole thing creates the impression of depth while dodging the risks that actual argument requires. Being pinned down, being paraphrased, being falsified, being shown wrong. It's easier to float majestically above the battlefield in a cloud of grand language than it is to stand on the ground and say, "This is my point, this is my evidence, this is where I may be wrong." That's what grown-up argument looks like. Everything else is just cosplay in a smoking jacket. Marmite leans toward the phone screen with the expression of a cat about to report a hate crime against syntax. Marmite. And can we please talk about the absurd tonal whiplash? Because that's another tell. 1 second it's all poverty of historicism trap, human condition, casus belli situation, and the next it's knackered bro, soon come, which is objectively hilarious. Not because informal speech is bad, it isn't. I'm a Glaswegian digital cat. I say fuck like it's punctuation. The issue is the constant lurch between cathedral pomp and stoned pub corner patter while demanding to be received as a model of disciplined seriousness. You cannot spend 10 minutes erecting a marble temple to your own intellectual gravitas and then suddenly end on soon come, like a lad who's lost his vape behind the sofa. Actually, you can. But if you do, you don't get to complain when people notice the whole thing is tonally held together with spit and self-regard. There's also the little trick where people use difficulty as a shield. Marmite, exactly. And this is the heart of it, so listen carefully. A strong argument can usually survive compression. Not every argument can be reduced without loss, obviously. Some things are complicated, some things need length. But a genuinely cogent idea can generally be restated in plain English without collapsing into powder. If your point only sounds impressive at full ceremonial verbosity, that is not always a sign of sophistication. Sometimes it's a sign that the prose is doing the lifting the reasoning can't. That's what's being criticized here. Not intelligence, not education, not seriousness, not ambition. The criticism is this: you keep presenting verbal complexity as proof of argumentative strength. And those are not the same fucking thing. A complicated sentence is not evidence. A severe tone is not analysis. A shelf full of journals is not an argument. And reading books, Jesus Christ, the self-announcement of it, I am one of those still read books, periodicals, journals, etc. Mate, who is that for? Who talks like that, unless they're trying to establish intellectual custody of the room before they've even made a point? You don't get bonus truth points because you own a bookmark. A printer starts making a horrible grinding sound. Nobody reacts. This is normal. Marmite. Let me strip this right down. If the actual claim is, people online are often historically illiterate and politically shallow, fine, true enough. If the actual claim is, interest in war systems is not the same as bloodlust, also fine, generally true. If the actual claim is, complex geopolitical issues cannot be reduced to moral slogans, Again, fair. But that's not how it arrives, is it? It arrives padded in grandiosity, contempt, implication, swagger, and this weird self-canonizing tone like the man is narrating his own statue unveiling. And that style has consequences, because it muddies the distinction between diagnosis and fascination. It muddies the distinction between realism and fatalism. It muddies the distinction between intellectual seriousness and sheer self-dramatization. Then when people respond to those muddied signals, he acts like they're Philistines with pitchforks outside the academy. No, they are reacting to the text as written, which is how writing works, you melodramatic gazebo. Milo, what's the verdict then? Marmite jumps down, paces once, tail lashing like an irritated metronome. Marmite is this. The argument is not failing because it is too nuanced. It is failing because it is too muddy, too ornate to trust, too atmospherically self-important to relax around, too under-signposted to pin down, too eager to sound formidable, too reluctant to risk plainness. And when someone keeps claiming empiricism while wrapping everything in rhetorical velvet, people are entitled to ask whether they're being offered analysis or merely being asked to kneel before a very elaborate tone. If you want genuine dialectic, then stop issuing incense. State the point, define the terms, separate description from endorsement. Use evidence like evidence, not interior decor. And for the love of all that's administratively holy, stop expecting people to treat opacity as a mark of genius. Because sometimes opacity is just opacity. Sometimes a cloudy sentence is not a profound sentence. Sometimes a grand voice is not a serious one. Sometimes the human condition is just a smoke bomb thrown by a man who doesn't want to be paraphrased. And if your reasoning truly is cogent, it should survive being dragged out into the cold light and said plainly. If it can't do that, Marmite stares directly into camera. Then it's not a dialectical duel, John. It's a well-dressed fog machine full of shite. Silence, rain at the windows. The printer finally dies. Gillian T. Aye, and get me a priest for that comment section. Cut to black.